something that is ongoing in the country at the moment, and that is the pro-Palestine and pro-Israel marches. And again, in London this week, there was a big pro-Palestine demonstration, and the usual suspects are still trying to smear that as an or pro-terrorist hate march. Here's a comment which I saw on social media from the leader of another political party, not my own, the Heritage Party, but the leader of another one called Richard Tice. You may have heard of him. He says on social media, "Just resign Rowley. Police cowed by anti-Semitic hate mob and cover up Holocaust memorial police. Police lost control of the streets, marches breaking law, and should have been banned when I said on October the 11th, as France did, pro-Hamas thugs ever more emboldened." Well, there's a lot of things wrong with that statement. Number one, in delving into the principal thesis of the statement is that the pro-Palestinian demonstrations caused the police to cover up a Holocaust memorial. That turns out not to be true. It turns out that it was the Royal Parks Administration that covered up a memorial of the Holocaust, which they do when there's any protest going on in London in order to protect it. It's not something that was a reaction to the pro-Palestine or anti-genocide marches in London. Again, the narrative that these are thugs, pro-Hamas thugs being emboldened is not right. There are many, many Jews who go on these marches, but just like certain groups which are challenging to the narratives of the powers that be, nobody in the mainstream media, or what I call the fake alternative right, of which Richard Tice seems to be a member, is now agitating against free speech and calling for protests to be banned. He specifically says that. But what you don't see are thousands of Jews against genocide marching along with a very wide, diverse crowd. There are Muslims there, of course. There are real ethnic Palestinians, as there are other Arabs and so on, but there are plenty of Anglo-Saxons on the march. And of course, there are the Jews there as well, marching against what they say is a Zionist entity and the Netanyahu regime in particular, which has been slaughtering women and children. And people are absolutely horrified about this and have been horrified at the extent of the slaughter, which is now up to over 35,000 people killed in Gaza. Now, of course, as I've always said, what happened on the 7th of October with Hamas was horrible. They should not have done that. They killed over 1,000 people, or their actions led to the deaths of over 1,000 people. Many of the people were killed on that day, of course, as we now know, were actually killed by the Israeli Defense Force, who enacted the Hannibal Protocol, which is if someone is taken hostage, you kill both the hostage taker and the hostage or hostages so that they don't have any political bargaining power. So we now know that that was the case on the 7th of October. Nevertheless, it was all because Hamas did come across the border and do what they wanted to do. But the response to that has been completely outlandish, and they have engaged in collective punishment, and it's abhorrent that so many women and children, and of course innocent men who are just doctors and engineers and teachers and journalists, nothing to do with any military action of Hamas, have also been killed over the 6 months at the rate of about 200 civilians a day. Now, if that had been done by any other nation, if this was being done by Russia, if this was being done by China, if this was being done by Iran or North Korea, there would be an immediate outcry. Everyone in the West would be calling for freedom and democracy and action to be taken to stop these terrible tyrants. But because Israel is doing it, there seems to be a complete blind spot from some people about Israel because it's Israel. And also there seems to be a deliberate attempt to not speak about it and to let this wicked regime get along and do whatever it wants to do. So I completely disagree with Richard Tice here and other people who are very, very disappointing, who I would agree with on some things like Brexit, and some people have gone further on other things, would agree with me on stopping LGBT indoctrination in schools, stopping mass immigration, and so on, even come out to be against the Ukraine war. Obviously, this particular person isn't. But on this issue, there are a lot of people who haven't woken up to what is the right side of history to be on. And that simply is to be against the genocide and slaughter of tens of thousands of innocent people, including 70% of them being women and children.